Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephanie. I am the compliance lead for Cobb County, and joining me today on the call is Ramon. Ramon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon. My name is Ramon Alamar. I am the Cobb County ARPA Compliance Manager.
And today we'll be discussing the ARPA compliance reporting requirements, as well as going over your requests for reimbursement and performance reports. The agenda for today's presentation begins with our ARPA background. We'll go into the Cobb County ARPA background, discuss a few common terms when dealing with compliance. We'll discuss reporting requirements, the guidance sheet that will be available to you. Then we'll go into the request for reimbursement form, your performance report, how to submit your reports, and then additional resources. On March 11, 2021, the President authorized $1.9 trillion in federal funding for states, counties, and cities to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic through the American Rescue Plan Act, commonly known as ARPA, State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. Of the $1.9 trillion, Cobb County received $147 million that must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and spent by December 31st, 2026. Essentially, it's a 2-year program. The county created an application process to administer the funding, and the deadline to apply was Friday, September 9th, 2022. Applications have to fall into one or more of the county priority areas to include economic development, support services, community health, county infrastructure, or public safety. Our purpose today is to discuss the reporting requirements for applicants who are approved for ARPA funding to implement projects or programs on behalf of the county. Some of the most commonly used terms throughout our compliance process to include reporting requirements are listed on this slide. I won't go into details of each term during our call today. However, I would like to highlight the most discussed terms during our presentation. For example, we'll go over KPIs. These are key performance indicators. These were discussed in the application, and we will be reported, or you will report on your KPIs within the performance report. These are quantifiable metrics used to measure and track progress towards achieving a specific goal. Subrecipient. A subrecipient is a non-federal entity that receives a subaward from a pass-through entity. In this case, the county is our pass-through entity, and the subrecipient is to carry out part of a federal program. A beneficiary is an individual or organization receiving a direct benefit of a federal program. In our case, that's the ARPA State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. And each organization has specific reporting requirements, which we will discuss on the next slide. Adhering to the county's reporting requirements supports transparency, responsibility, and equity in the use of federal funds. Depending on the information in your application, your organization will be classified as a subrecipient, contractor, or beneficiary of federal funds. Upon project approval by the Board of Commissioners, an award notification will be sent via email with details on how to submit requests for payment and reporting requirements. The reporting requirements include the completion of one Excel file with 3 tabs, including your supporting documentation. The tab 1 will include guidance with instructions on how to complete the forms. Tab 2 is your RFR, or request for reimbursement form, and tab 3 is the performance report. On the slide, you'll see a snapshot of how each of those tabs, all 3 tabs, look within the one Excel file. The guidance tab contains detailed description of each metric for the performance report. Please be sure to start here before you complete the form. The descriptions will assist you in understanding the type of information and data we need for your reports. This in turn will help limit the number of requests for information or requests for additional information you will receive from us so we can approve your payment request. My co-facilitator, Ramon, will walk us through the RFR and performance report forms through the use of a scenario. Ramon, I pass it over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. To help facilitate learning, we're going to introduce a scenario that will be used when filling out the request for reimbursement and performance report later on in this presentation. In this scenario, Bailey is representing Sample Nonprofit Inc., a local business that focuses on providing workforce development training for low and moderate income residents of Cobb County. Bailey submitted a project application. His project was approved for $23,000 and 1 month has elapsed. The purpose of this project is to provide monthly training classes that teaches people how to effectively search for jobs, write a resume, and interview preparation. The expenses incurred during this first month where one training section has taken place, were from a room to conduct the class, materials to facilitate the training, and an instructor to teach the classes. The labor costs come from the employees of Sample Nonprofit Inc. and is $200. Materials costs come from the training materials, which include pens, paper, and printing materials. The costs associated with these materials are $50. The rented classroom, which will fall under the lease category, is rented from the county, and the price was $250. The request for reimbursement is comprised of 3 main sections. Number 1, the instructions. Second one, administrative data. And the third one, the expenses that were incurred from the previous period. We will go over these sections in a greater detail in the next slide. Okay, Stephanie, can you go to slide number 9? Okay, thank you. For the administrative section, all this information will stay the same for each request for reimbursement submitted, minus the FR number. The project name and subrecipient organization were submitted as part of the application, and the unique identity identifier can be retrieved from SAN.gov. The sub-award number will be emailed to you along with the approved amount. Based on our scenario, this amount is $23,000. The request for reimbursement number correlates to which period is being represented, with 1 being the first period of the program, and usually the periods are typically 1 month long. The expenses section breaks down the costs incurred by the subrecipient from the previous period. From our scenario, the labor costs come from the employee of Sample Nonprofit Inc., and this was $200. Material costs come from the training materials, and the cost associated was $50. The rented classroom, which falls under the lease category, is rented from the county, and the price was $250. The total amount being claimed, and therefore the requested amount, totals to $500. Proper documentation that should be attached for these expenses include things such as receipts, invoices, agreement or contracts, timesheets, and payroll data. Please make sure no personally identifiable information is included in any of the attachments. For the signature, the document can be either converted to a PDF and digitally signed, or it can be printed out, manually signed, and then scanned to a PDF. The performance report is comprised of 3 main sections: administrative data, expenditures, and performance information. And we will go over these sections in a greater detail in the next slide. The subrecipient organization or name, sub-award number, and awarded amount can be taken directly from the request for reimbursement admin data. For expenditures plan, This number is the remaining amount of funding that is expected to be used to complete the project, and the expenditure actual is the amount of funding that was spent from the previous period. For this scenario, we expended $500, so that is the actual expenditures. We are predicting to spend $23,000 total for the project, so the expenditures plan is the difference between the total expenses predicted and the amount spent. So $23,000 minus 500 give us $22,500. The list of expenditure should be reflective of the expenses on the request for reimbursement, and the supporting documentation that is attached to the report from the request for reimbursement should already include receipts for each expense. The milestone reach section is a place to describe the project milestone reach. For our scenario, the project team was able to develop a tailored curriculum and conduct community outreach to target low and moderate income residents for training. The key performance indicators are a quantifiable metric to use, measure, and track progress toward achieving a specific goal. These were submitted with the project application so they can be pulled from there. For outcomes achieved, it is the outcome data from the planned KPIs since the previous reporting period. Billy drafted the following KPIs during the application submission. Train 400 people on job search techniques, train 300 people on resume building, have 200 people go through all 3 training types. Based on our KPIs, our outcomes achieved were training 50 out of 400 people on job search techniques, with 87% being low to moderate income, and training 15 out of 300 people on resume building, with 91 being low to moderate income. The project completion status is the overall percentage of planned activities that have been completed. Billy has completed 1 out of 10 classes, so the completion status is 10%. Barriers to project implementation are any sort of barrier that you see that will or is causing issues, setbacks, or increasing risk. Billy has had a hard time reaching out to the community for participants and has heard that the room he typically rents might be booked for the next month. So he writes a brief description on these in the barriers to project implementation field. The press mention portion is simply a short description of any encounter with the media. Billy talked to a local editor who decided to write a short newspaper article, so he wrote a short summary of this encounter in the press mention portion. The stakeholder engagement area is a narrative description of any key stakeholders engaged on the project since the previous reporting period and how they contribute to project impact. Stakeholders can be a range of different types of individuals, but Billy thought that the most beneficial engagement was with the beneficiaries of the program. So he wrote about how he conducted exit surveys to help improve the program. Since the project is not completed yet, the plan to complete outstanding objectives is the field where the brief description is placed on how the next steps are to be completed. Billy still has training to conduct and plans on for the community outreach, so he described that in this field. The technical assistance / training needs are if a subrecipient believes they need help in a certain area. This can be project specific or encompass things such as federal reporting requirements, among others. Billy wasn't clear on how to fill out a request for reimbursement or performance report, so he annotated that on this field. Finally, the report needs to be signed and dated. The same process as the request for reimbursement can be used. Either physical or digital signatures are acceptable. Thank you. Back to you, Stephanie.
Hey, thanks, Ramon. Now that you've completed and signed all of your reports and forms, it is time to submit to Cobb County. Reports should be submitted on a monthly basis to the ARPA@cobbcounty.org mailbox. Please be ensured to include the following: completed and signed request for reimbursement on RFR form, completed and signed performance report, all your supporting documentation to support costs, and please be sure to email with the correct subject line. For example, sample nonprofit Inc. RFR_01 and performance report _01. This will help us keep track of all of your payment requests and all of your performance reports. So please be sure to use the correct subject line. You can find additional resources, including the presentation from today, by visiting the Cobb County ARPA website at www.cobbcounty.org/ARPA. We created guides, FAQs, and video recordings to assist you in meeting compliance and reporting responsibilities. As an update to where we are in the application process, the application closed on Friday, September 9th, and the team is currently reviewing applications. This will be an ongoing process until all applications have been reviewed and applicants are notified of their status and next steps. We estimate completion of this process by the fall of 2022, which is this year. The Board of Commissioners will have reviewed and approved all eligible applications on a rolling basis. Please remember this timeline is subject to change as we have provided an estimated timeline. We are here to assist you throughout the process. There's a host of information on the Cobb County ARPA website, but you can also contact us directly by emailing arpa@cobbcounty.org. Thank you to my co-facilitator, Ramon, and thank you, audience, for your time and attention. We hope this video was helpful, and we wish you the very best in your application and compliance experience.